Bojo Knalia, a Pegish Imnoya Pana. We here at Nishnaabemwin in Nipissing and Wang believe peer review is an important process in the education process. However, due to lack of speaker accessibility, scheduling, and these lessons being produced by second language learners, we tend to make mistakes in how Nishnaabemwin is represented. We encourage you to think with a critical mind when watching our videos and question the validity of something said in the video that catches your attention. We are language learners and naturally don't know what we don't know. We don't discourage others from helping us out by educating us, and if you see a mistake you would like us to rectify, you can do so by contacting the email in the video description. We also ask for your patience in waiting for edits, because it is a long process to edit mistakes we share in our videos, and there is the possibility that it might not align with the speakers of Nipissing First Nation. Miigwech Bisinduyang, Wewehenag Nawamdamuk.
On in Bojo Kanalia, Mr. McLeod Mondayamina, Bajinaka Queen Ween Monim. I just want to let you guys know that links to the dictionary, PDFs to the worksheet, audio files are in links in the description of this video, as well as any other resources that'll help you out with this lesson will eventually be there as soon as I'm done making them. Aho, miigwech. On in Bojo, Mr. McLeod Mondayamina. And today's lesson is on Nipissing Nishnaabemwin Relative Roots, or VTA. So today we're learning how to be specific in Nipissing Nishnaabemwin. So what are relative roots? We have the sign up, meaning to write down all these points before we move on to the next slide. Relative roots are how we talk about specifics in Nishnaabemwin. Relative roots can refer to manner, location, either from, towards, or place of, quantity, number of times, and the degree. Relative roots often take the form of prefixes. When present, relative roots will change our B-form grammar patterns to C-form grammar patterns, so that's B-form with initial change. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on. Miskoye ambe. Some of our relative roots have what's called a particle form. A particle form is when a relative root can be used as an independent word separated from our usual verb or verb phrases, whereas other root words cannot stand on their own as independent words. Sometimes relative roots can be built right into the word, and sometimes they are hidden in a word so well it's really difficult to perceive them. Here we have the points for you to write down before we move on to the next slide. Make sure to pause the video and write these down. Miskoye ambe. What are the relative roots? The following are relative roots most dialects use, and Nipissing does use some of these. A few are different. So the first one is eje or je, also known as in or n. Its C-form version is eje or n, and it can mean how, manner, and then, towards a certain direction, and can also be used to soften commands. Our next one is unje or nje, also can be pronounced as und or n, depending on context. Its C-form version is wenje, enje, or end. When used, it can mean reason, why, from a certain direction, or for. Next relative root is dasa or daswa. Its C-form version is endasa, endasu, or ensa. When used, it is in reference to number,
so many times, or every time. The next relative root is apiche or piche, also pronounced as apit or peat, depending on context. Its C form version is epiche or epit. When used, it's in reference to degree, extent, so much, or comparative. Next relative root is aku, sometimes ku, can be pronounced as aqua or que. Its C form version is eku or equa. When used, its meaning is since, length, times, and can mean usually or used to. The last relative root is daje or done, and its C form version is endaje or endun, and when used, it's in reference to place of or numbered. So what are the Nipissing dialect relative roots? We also have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. The following are the relative roots that Nipissing uses. So Nipissing does use j or n with the de-stressed I in front, and its C form version, eje or n. It also means how, manner, and then towards a certain direction, and can be also used to soften commands. We also use nje or nd with a de-stressed O in front, and its C form version, wenje, enje, or end. It also means reason, why, from a certain direction, or for. Instead of dasa, in Nipissing we use nsid. Its change version or C form version is ensid or ensa. It also means number, so many times, or every time. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miske ambe. The next one we have is piche or peat with the de-stressed A sound in front, and its C form versions, epiche or epit, and it also means degree, extent, so much, or comparative. Next we have is k or kwa with the de-stressed A sound in front. For the C form versions, ekku or equa. It also means since, length, times, usually, and used to. And the last one, instead of daje or done, in Nipissing we use che, and its C form version is enche, and this can mean place of or numbered. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskoya ambe. How can we tell what root words mean? When comparing and deciphering root word translations, I recommend comparing all of our options to the context of the sentence, and then selecting the translation that best fits. Let's examine some je sentences to better understand how they are translated. For each translation of je, let's select the option that makes the most sense based on the words used in the sentence. What fits best context-wise? A, how or manner in reference to something else. B, and then. C, towards. Or D, softens the voice of the command. So our sentence here is, Ngi mod atwagan, mi gajin niyawag. I stole the card, that's blank. I got it. A, how or manner. I stole the card, that's how I got it. Our next sentence is Ingin dawa ma mos gajim kwug. And that means I was searching for the moose, blank, I found him. Would how or manner fit best? And then, towards, or softens command. B, and then. I was searching for the moose, and then I found him. For this next one, our sentence is Mtigun gije kanjweb non mozon mkwa. That means the bear pushed the moose blank the tree. So what fits best? How or manner, and then, towards, or softening command? C, towards. The bear pushed the moose towards the tree. And our last one here, migoje mo gigo, or migoje mwe gigo. Blank, you eat some fish. So what fits best here? How or manner, and then, towards, or softens the voice of the command? D, softens the voice of the command with why don't. Why don't you eat some fish? So when translating our relative roots, it's best to compare and contrast all the meanings shared in this lesson and use what best suits the context. Je for how, manner, and then, towards a certain direction, and command softener. We have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. So when we have a referenced event and je as a prefix, we can understand that je means how or manner. Like in the sentence, Ingi mod atwagan, miga je neyawag. I stole the card. That's how I got it. From here, Ingi mod atwagan is the referenced event that je is referring to. Next, if we have a prior event plus je as a prefix, it means and then. So, ngim de wab ma mos, gajen kwag. So, ngim de wab ma mos is our prior event. I was searching for the moose, and je functions as a and then translation here, gajen kwag, and then I found him. If we have a locative followed by a je prefix, it means towards. So we have ntigungi je ganjwab non mozon kwa. The bear pushed the moose towards the tree. Since we have a locative here, we can think of it as a goal. This is where the moose was being pushed towards that location. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before moving on to the next slide. Miskoye ambe. Next, if we have a reference like a name with je as a root word, it means how or manner. We have kwejim, indishnakana and dai. Kwejim is how I called or named my dog. So the word kwejim is the reference or name, and je is referring to that. Next, we have je as a prefix, and then when a verb is in its imperative form or has an imperative suffix, we can understand it as a command softener. Migoje mo or migoje mwe gigo. Why don't you eat some fish? We'll give you a chance to pause the video here, write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskoye ambe. Nje, reason, why, from a certain direction, or for. We have the sign up again, meaning you should write these down before we move on to the next slide. So when we have a locative and nje as a prefix, it means from. Siningi and jigana wab man wabo zon nkwa. The bear watched the rabbit from that rock. We have ande plus nje as a prefix and context. This means why or reason. Ande wenje pikidnad agnebik. Why are you releasing the snake? We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskoye ambe. Next, if we have a locative plus nje as a root word, it means from. Mshkim dong indian jib na atwagan. I pulled the card from the bag. We have some initial context plus nje as a particle form with additional context, and this means for. Indo and siddo dwin on al sakajemnado kanage go mi gwewin injisa tak mikwe. We acknowledge the Creator for the gifts of Mother Earth. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskoye ambe. Next, we have insid, which means number so many times or every time. So, onde plus insid as a prefix and then context. How many, numbered. Onde mnik ka insid mkwa dwa mzinchig nug. How many pictures did you find? So for here, we're asking for a number, and this is why we use insid. Number plus insid as a prefix is numbered. Nsimdina ngi insid mkwag mzinchig nug. I found 30 pictures. So because we're specifying a specific number, this is why we use insid. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskaya, ambe. Next, we have prior context plus insid as a prefix in C form means every time. Inga bigwan gush ensa bizindwag nene. I become sleepy every time I listen to the man. So here our prior context is Inga bigwan gush. I become sleepy. Ensa every time. Bizindwag nene. I listen to the man. Root word. In this example, Nipissing reverted back to dasa instead of insid. Amik engid sona. I trapped a beaver. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskaya, ambe. Next, we have picha for degree, extent, so much, or comparative. We also have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. So as a prefix, picha means degree or so much. Wasa mzinchigan indo picha minwen ma. I like that picture so much. As a root word, it still means degree or so much. Ido p10 min. I think so highly of you. Here, with some initial context, peach as a particle form and additional context, this is where it can mean a comparison. Jason Noach and Minwen Ma peach dash Freddy Krueger. This means I like Jason more than Freddy Krueger. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskaya, ambe. K for since, length, times, usually, and used to. We have the sign up again, meaning you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. So we have related context plus k as a prefix with C form past tense, means ever since. And bibis eshkam nig kendasa gakomaji nabwad moag. My baby is getting smarter ever since I started reading to them. So the related context, bibis eshkam nig kendasa. My baby is getting smarter ever since. This is our k prefix. C form, past tense, ga, followed by maji, start, nabwa the mao, read to him or her, or for him or her, and then ug, me to him or her. Specific locative with k as a prefix. This is how we express as far. Ekonijing and tigung ingikotabana wawashkesh. Ekonijing and tigung, the second tree, ingikotabana is as far as I dragged wawashkesh, the deer. So here k is in reference to length. And here's a root word example, subject to change. Mtig indakwandwana. I am climbing the tree. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskoye ambe. Past tense followed by k as a particle is how we express used to.
Nishnaabemwin ma comes in again. I used to like the picture. So we have our past tense gi and then ka as an independent word. This is how we express used to. Next, present tense plus ka as a particle means usually. Namai wisnawagning kuendom kwa beans. I usually find the baby underneath the table. So because we're using ka as a particle and we're talking in present tense, this is how we express usually. Next, we have a changed prefix, temporal adverb, usually a number, and this is the numbered time. So we have the sentence here with ka and without ka to show how it changes. Nijing ingiwa mam kwa means I saw the bear 2 times versus eko nijing ingiwa mam kwa the second time I saw the bear. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miske ambe. Che for place of and numbered. We have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before we move on to the next slide. So we have locative and che is a prefix. It means place. Shkoi wiguaming gichim kwa anemush. I found the dog behind the house. So our locative is wiguaming, at or on the house. And kwa is our verb. Che is in reference to where we found the dog. Che as a prefix in C form means place of. And wija and chiwab magwa wesiag. In wija, I want to go. And che where wab magwa wesiag. I see animals, also known as a zoo. In this example, it's place of seeing animate nouns. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on. Miske ambe. Next, as a root word, in we chi kwa dabones, I want to play with the toy car. Or as a root word in C form plus a B form suffix, en chiong, we, not you, are numbered, also translated as our but not your family. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miske ambe. When does ande mean how, why, when, and where? Since wagnen and wanen can be translated as who and what, it's only natural for learners to think ande means who, what, when, where, why, and how. Now that we are aware of relative roots, we have a better understanding that ande generally is our content question marker, and the initial roots determine what kind of content 5W's question we are asking. Keep in mind, relative roots usually change our grammar patterns from B form to C form, so we'll often see initial change. Every content 5W's question is formed in C form except for where questions, but they are inflected in C form when relative roots are used or required. Here are the points for you to write down in your notes. Make sure to write them down before we move on to the next slide. Miske ambe. For example, ande plus B form means where. But if a relative root is present, like in the form of a root word or prefix, our grammar pattern changes to ande plus C form means where. Ande plus je plus C form is how. Ande plus je plus C form is why. Ande plus je plus C form is where is it directed to. Ande plus je plus C form means where is it coming from. And then ande plus ch plus C form means where is it happening at. 5W questions and how. We have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. 1N plus C form is how we ask a who question.
Wagnan plus C form is how we ask a what question. Ande plus nj plus C form is how we ask a why question. Ande plus j plus C form is how we ask a how question. Ande P plus C form is how we ask a when question. And then ande j plus C form is how we ask a where is it directed to question. Ande plus nj plus C form is a where is it coming from question. And then ande plus ch plus C form is where is it happening at question. We'll give you a chance here to pause the video and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskaye ambe. When do we use relative roots? And we have the sign up, meaning that you should write these down before moving on to the next slide. We use relative roots in the form of prefixes, root words, and sometimes particles. Relative roots are used for talking or inquiring about specific characteristics. Inquiring about specifics is when we use the 5W questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Specifics relate to manner, location, either from, towards, place, quantity, number of times, or degree. They often change our grammar patterns from B form to C form. We'll give you a chance to pause the video here and write these down in your notes before we move on to the next slide. Miskaye ambe. Miigwech bisindueg mise aja. Thank you all for listening to me. That's it for now.